always thought working harder would give me the life I wanted until I hit ground zero. Deep down, I always wanted to be a someone. I always wanted to be someone who could actually do something. But I had all these failures in my life. I literally just got cut for my soccer team, the sport that I loved, the sport that I found my purpose in, the sport that I didn't even know that I could live without. And I had friends all around me who didn't want the same things as me, who didn't want anything more and were content with life. At this point, I was torn between the two paths because on one side, I had the person that I was who had just been threatened, who had just felt like he had been punished for trying his hardest, for doing the best he could, and still getting cut from the soccer team. And I felt like I couldn't rely on people. I started to take everything personally, and I didn't know what to do. You guys have to understand how truly lost I felt at this point. I literally was looking for answers, and I thought the fastest way to do it was just to change cold turkey. I started looking for answers in the chaos, anything that could help me, anything that could give me direction. And I thought the fastest change was just to change completely. I stopped hanging out with those friends. I stopped hanging out with everyone. And I went in this state of isolation where I wasn't able to tell anyone what I was doing because I couldn't actually understand it myself. I tried to pull principles from other people that I could apply to myself, watching these motivational videos like Rocky, watching these motivational movies like Creed, where you can literally see here I was so unstable. I was literally saying, fuck your mindset, fuck your feelings, be a man. Because I truly didn't understand what was happening with myself. I was chasing more of a feeling than anything. And I was looking for anything that could put that into words. And as lonely and as destroying as it was, I was eventually able to pull out these principles like discipline, like ambition, like drive, trying to channel this back into myself, trying to put this back into my own work. And that's when I could finally start going to the gym because I started going to the gym and I could start to see these things compound in my life. I could start to prove to myself that I could do these things, but I was still stuck. I still felt like deep down something in me was still relying on other people and I still didn't know what to do. I was experiencing literally so much pain that I went numb. I didn't want to tell anyone that was going on. At the time, I went through one of the hardest breakups of my life because I put all of that energy that I had that used to be in my friends, that used to be in that past life that I had in soccer, and put it all on this girl. And all I ever got out of that was I was told I was too much because I didn't have the standards for myself developed. As you can see here, I was literally so unstable. I said things like it had to be done. It hurt so bad, but it had to be done. And I would get even more destroyed because every single time I would reach back out, it would hurt even more. I had to keep working harder in the gym, and I did, but I felt deep down miserable. I started filling up my life with distractions to numb the pain. As you can see here, I felt the most uncomfortable I ever did. I filled my life with food, filled my life with video game, filled my life with other girls, and I couldn't even understand what was going on. I just felt so uncomfortable in my own skin. I didn't want to take pictures anymore. I didn't want to be seen outside. I honestly felt like I was in my own shell. I had my family trying to tell me what was right, but deep down they didn't understand the full story because I never told them. And even though they wanted the best for me, every single thing felt like another jab at who I was. Every single thing felt like another personal attack on what I was dealing with. And I didn't want to admit the fact that I was clueless to what I was doing, so I would never tell them. I didn't want to admit the fact that I wasn't that strong guy that they thought. But all it ever did was ignore reality. All it ever did was push me deeper into that hole of misunderstanding and never allow me to actually change. Eventually, I got this summer job, and I was literally putting so many hours in it to distract myself from the pain. I was putting so many hours into it to the point where I'd literally be working from like waking up at 6 a.m., literally going until 6 p.m. the actual day. So working 10, 12-hour shifts, going home, showering because I would be so dirty, and then literally going straight to the gym after eating something. And I would literally go to bed at like 1 a.m., at like 12 p.m., to wake up the next day at 6. And I remember I had this cottage that I used to go to and I used to enjoy it every summer, but I felt so destroyed from the week. I felt so unrecovered that I literally didn't even want to go anymore. Nothing else mattered. I was getting leaner than I had ever gotten, but deep down I still had that thing that was missing. And that's when I got fired. Because when I got fired, no longer was it just unfortunate. It reopened the wound because there was genuinely something wrong with me. When I had gotten cut from my soccer team, it was one thing. When I had gotten dumped, it was another thing. When I didn't know what I was doing, it was another thing. But when I got fired, now it was a trend. Now it was an actual pattern of things that were happening. And deep down, I was still trying to prove myself. Deep down, I was still taking everything personally. And I had to go back and reflect. I had to realize that my pride, my ego, and everything that I had built myself on was stopping me from seeing what was actually happening. And when I could get fired, sure, it was unfortunate, but I deserved it. I deserved getting fired because I couldn't see what was right in front of me. And it was the next step in becoming who I was meant to become. Because throughout this journey, I had been telling myself the same thing over and over and over again. First, when I wanted to change, I started cutting off friends. I got cut from soccer. I was trying to figure it all out, but I couldn't see the same ideas that kept repeating. I never actually wanted to admit that I was wrong, so I kept doing the same thing. I kept doubling down on the same thing that wasn't working, expecting something to be different. After getting dumped, I completely doubled down on the identity that I was living. I completely doubled down on the fact that I was right because it felt like to lie to myself then would be to lie to myself for all these years, would be to destroy the identity that I had. So I kept going, I kept pushing forward. Every single thing that happened, I took it as a personal attack. Every single message I got, every single piece of help, even the people who were trying to help me, I saw it as a personal attack. I felt like the whole world was against me. I felt like every single person was attacking me, and I couldn't see it because when I would actually have to see it, I would have to admit that I was wrong, and I couldn't do it. My pride couldn't do it. I had taken too much. I had gotten cut from my soccer team. I had gotten dumped by this girl, and to admit that I was wrong would be just another bullet to give other people to attack me, and I could never see that. The more that happened, the more pain I felt, the more numb I got. I started pushing away the question. I started pushing away my identity so that people would never be able to see what actually was happening. But that only ever made me feel worse about myself. Getting fired, I hit rock bottom because I realized that there was actually something wrong with this mentality. And if I never changed, that things would never change my life. More effort only ever made the problem worse. And I had to admit that effort wasn't the problem, that trying more and doing more was never going to fix a broken system. And I could never see it because I would always dismiss those things through my pride. I would always be convinced I had it all figured out and keep lying to myself over and over again because I didn't want to see the solution. I didn't actually want to change. I wanted this change, but I wasn't okay with confronting the fact that I was wrong. My ego could not accept that, so I would never do it. Instead of actually seeing the lessons as what they were, instead of actually seeing them as what they were trying to show me or redirect me, I would only ever see them as personal and punishment because it would protect that ego, it would protect that identity I had built up for myself. And the one thing that stayed constant in that all was the direction. I couldn't see that I was going in the wrong spot. I couldn't see this identity wasn't working for me. And I couldn't accept that I was the problem. I would always just think others were. I would think people in better situations than me just got lucky, that they were just gifted, that they just knew more than me or had a better situation because it was always pushing away from the fact that I had to change, that there was something wrong with me. I had the discipline, I had the ambition, I had the effort, but I was missing the most important part. And I could never explain it because I was hiding it. I was pushing it away with all the distractions I was doing, eating a bunch of junk food, playing video games all day. Filling my life with these distractions allowed me to go numb. It allowed me to protect my ego. It allowed me to be blinded to what actually was happening so I would never see the problem. But when my slope, my direction, why, purpose, and all of that was wrong, more effort only ever moved me backwards. And getting fired from that job finally exposed that. It re exposed that wound. It reopened that wound that I had before. And it left me now lost, confused, and angry because I was going to have to accept the fact. I was going to have to accept the fact that people could start in similar places as me. I started seeing people start in the same position as me, put in the similar outputs and get a different result. But because I was so blinded by my ego, because I was so blinded by the work that I was putting in, I realized that working hard wasn't just that. That my effort wasn't going to do it anymore. And I couldn't hide behind this effort that I was doing. I was going to actually have to face the truth, no matter how hard it was. Because when my effort, direction, alignment, where I started weren't aligned, everything fell apart. I realized that working hard didn't guarantee success. And success consisted of not only effort, because effort was the thing I had, but as well as direction, alignment, and where you started. I finally understood that these exact things that I was avoiding, that these exact things I was hiding by going numb and filling my life with distractions, were the exact things I needed to actually change. Once I could actually look at those distractions and see what they were doing, see what they were avoiding, then I could finally start to fix my life. I could finally start to change, and I could finally see that life that I actually wanted to live. Because deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Deep down, I knew I didn't have it all figured out, but it was just coming to admit that. And it took me all of those lessons. It took me all of those things that happened to finally be able to see what was really happening. I finally learned to accept that the pain of lying to myself was always going to be greater than the pain of not coming who I wanted to become. Every single day felt awful. Every single day felt like this pain that I couldn't explain, that I couldn't tell people because I was so embarrassed to admit that I knew what to do, but I wouldn't do it. I was so embarrassed to admit that I was the problem, that what I was doing wasn't the right thing. But once I got fired, I knew I had to change. I knew everything had to be different. And that's when I could finally accept that I was the problem. Once I could accept that I was the problem, I started to revisit what had happened before. I actually saw what it was trying to show me instead of it being personal attacks. Because when I got fired, when I got dumped, I realized that I didn't have these standards for myself. I realized that I couldn't tell right from wrong and I couldn't actually hear what needed to be heard. And every single time that I would try and prove I was right, I was only being delusional of myself. I was only pushing off that pain of tomorrow until it overwhelmed me, until I kept experiencing those lessons over and over and over again. once I could put my effort into fixing what actually mattered, building my faith out with the Lord, building myself out, actually reflecting and thinking about all of the outcomes that happened in my life and realizing that I could blame other people or I could actually fix myself because I would never be able to change what other people did, but I would be able to change what myself did. And once I could do that, life started getting better. I had the same amount of effort put into these tasks, but finally I started getting this direction. Finally, I started moving in the path that I wanted to be in with the gym, with my life. I started a business and I learned to start helping people. I've been able to get client results. I've been able to help clients literally overcome loss because of what my program has done. And it's been the most fulfilling thing ever because I remember feeling so lost. I felt that great pain of what I was doing. I felt that great pain in pushing it off. And I just knew that there had to be a better way. I knew there had to be a better way. And once I could actually accept who I was, actually accept the change, that's when everything could change. I've learned to appreciate life and appreciate all the lessons because without these lessons, without these barriers, I would never be able to change. I would never be able to actually live my life with guidance. And I would always be living my life unaligned with who I was. I would always be living my life not knowing what to do next, not knowing what my direction was. And building a relationship with God, building a relationship and actually learning to respect myself instead of pushing off what I needed to hear allowed me to become the person I've always wanted to become. I wasn't lost. I was just avoiding the truth. And the truth was, it wasn't my effort that was wrong, it was my direction. So if you're tired of not seeing any progress, if you're tired of being stuck, take the time to be honest with yourself. And if you're serious about actually fixing what's going on, if you're serious about actually understanding what's happening, I have a link in the description. We can fill out a calendar link and see if you're a good fit for the program.